Unfortunately, we have a lot of active tropical weather across the map for today. Dr. Erika Navarro, of course, here with us as well. And we're counting them, 5 of them across the region.
Yeah, too many. But this is the peak of the hurricane season, so it's not surprising to see a map like this at this time of the year. Irma is now post-tropical. It's no longer a tropical system by nature, but we do have 2 other areas that we're closely watching here in the Atlantic. The first one being Hurricane Jose. Now, this one not posing any threats to land at the moment, but it is there and we are watching it because it's going to meander for a few days. Right now it's at Category 1 hurricane intensity. We're likely going to see it remain and hover about this level of strength through the next couple of days, but it's going to be taking a bit of an interesting track because it's feeling all these impacts of wind shear right now. You can see these thunderstorms really just getting blown off in a completely different direction here.
Yeah.
Those thunderstorms moved away from the center.
Right, not symmetrical at all in terms of its identity, and it's not moving a whole lot the next couple of days.
No, you're right, and that, Jackie, that will remain over this over this part of the basin. Right now, there are those upper level winds steering it and pulling things apart. But if we take a look at the forecast track over the next couple of days, it's not going to feel very much of anything. So it's going to sit and spin and then eventually make a turn off to the northwest. So we may see some weakening with that system because it's going to move over its own cold wake. That's the cooler air, cooler water that hurricanes draw up from underneath them. But by the time we move off to Sunday, we could potentially see some strengthening again as it starts to move off towards some warmer waters. But not expecting any impacts from that one. We could see some coastal impacts in the long term with some big waves and some rip currents. But again, right now, not anticipating any U.S. impacts.
You can't say that the Carolinas are completely off the hook, though. It's something to pay attention to in the days ahead.
Absolutely. We've got this other invest area here out in the eastern Atlantic. This one not likely to develop over the next couple of days because of the unfavorable upper level winds that are also impacting this one. 10% chance of development being indicated by the National Hurricane Center. But if it does, if it's able to get its act together, it's going to be moving off to the north, which is certainly something we are very glad to see.
If we could see this kind of pattern staying with us, that would be great. Do you see a lot of shear in the Atlantic now over the next several days or longer term?
Yeah, right now we are seeing some increased shear, which is great. We're finally seeing that activity come down a little bit, but looking ahead towards next week, we could see those conditions change as the upper level features start to progress off to the east. So one to watch very closely, but right now the other good news is that Irma is starting to weaken. It's making its way off and spreading out really, so we're not seeing many more impacts of that aside from some wind and some heavy rain. But something to watch, the rivers this week.
Yeah, look at all those purple triangles there are river gauges that are in major flood. When do you think we're going to see this water begin to recede?
Unfortunately, I think this is going to persist for the next couple of days. Potentially by the end of the week, we'll be seeing those levels come down, but this is still some heavy flooding. Again, it takes some time for that water to move downstream, and we saw a lot of rainfall, a lot of rainfall with this system. So they had huge impacts in Jacksonville. We saw impacts also along the coastal areas of South Carolina yesterday. Just a lot of moisture being brought in with a storm of this magnitude.
So where Irma is going, the impacts more like kind of nuisance conditions than anything else, you think?
Absolutely. I think at this point, because we're losing the energy and the characteristics of Irma, the moisture associated with it will remain, but it's being spread out over a really broad area. So we'll get some showery weather heading up into the northeast. I think a nuisance is probably a good word because we're not expecting any tremendous rainfall amounts with this, maybe 1 to 2 inches at most.
All right, good news. Well, we've got much more.